So what's in store here? First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the background with the E-Series, where it came from, and why ASE is doing that testing. I want to talk specifically about how the E-Series, the truck equipment tests, differs from the truck series. We'll talk a little bit about our ASE study guide, and we'll talk about question types that we use on the tests, a few sample questions, and finally we'll finish out by talking about some training resources. The E-Series was developed at the request of the National Truck Equipment Association. The test focuses on the knowledge of the skills required to install and repair a wide variety of truck equipment, such as boxes or boom lifts or dump bodies, maybe some plows, even auxiliary axles, just to name a few of the types of equipment. While repair these systems is included in the tests, they are predominantly focused on installation of these systems, and that's a big difference from most other ASE tests where we're talking about diagnostics and repair. These tests require a very specialized skill set beyond what is expected of a truck technician doing maintenance, diagnosis, and repair. Like all ASE tests, the content of the test as well as all the questions are formulated by subject matter experts, people who do this job every day for a living. To earn an ASE credential, you must pass the test written by your peers and also have 2 years of experience working as a technician. If you achieve certification in all 3 E-Series specialties, you earn the status of Master Truck Equipment Technician. So I want to talk about each of the 3 tests and how they differ from regular truck technician tests. What I have on the screen here now is the content areas for the E1 tests. And you can see that the first content area is on frame preparation. In doing this work, it frequently involves repairing, lengthening, or shortening the frame and relocating components already attached to the frame. Now, these folks who do this work, they often call themselves upfitters and often bodybuilders. And what they're dealing with is often they've just got a cab and a chassis that they got new from a manufacturer, and then they're adding equipment to it. So sometimes the frame doesn't work. They got to lengthen it. They got to shorten it. That involves extensive work with the frame, and they're very specific in how you can do that. Second area is suspension systems. If you're cutting and altering that frame, then often you have to relocate the suspension systems. Sometimes you have to supplement the suspension systems with springs, and often you might have to add an additional axle assembly. On drive shaft preparation and installation, the area code C, of course, if you're cutting that frame and lengthening it, you're going to have to lengthen or shorten and phase a drive shaft. In content area D, the body and equipment, in there you'll see questions that are about fabricating or locating subframes, maybe mounting and routing procedures, and following the manufacturers and federal guidelines in all of the procedures. Now, those federal and manufacturer guidelines, of course, are very important and very critical. So often in these tests, you will find very specific questions about critical specifications that you're expected to know. In our regular ASE tests, often we say, you know, we're not going to ask you about specifications that you can look up in a matter of minutes. But in this test, those specifications whether it be cab to box clearance or ground clearance or overall height or even the crash system at the back of one of these. Those are very critical, and so this industry expects you to have certain of those specifications memorized.
Hey Dave, pardon the interruption here. We've got somebody in the audience who's raised their hand, and maybe it's relevant to that content you just presented. So let's give it a shot once and see if we can hear what this question might be. So I'm going to, I believe it's pronounced Sengiz H. You've got a comment or a question? Your mic is open. Go ahead. We had you for a second. Now your mic muted itself. You may have a mic control on your end where you have to unmute it. Try it one more time, please. All right. I don't know what the issue is. Maybe having a mic control there. Okay, he's having a problem with his microphone. So let's go ahead and move on, Dave.
Sure. Thanks. In taking a look at the E2 test, this is electrical electronic systems installation and repair. And on this particular test, there are some things which do mimic what you have to do as a regular truck technician, and other things that are very specific to these systems. Of course, in the general electronic diagnosis, to be successful with these questions, you need to be familiar with basic electrical, electronic, and high voltage concepts. Things such as checking for continuity, checking for voltage, voltage drops, current flow, and resistance. You'll also need to be able to read and comprehend schematics and use them to diagnose problems. They rely heavily upon those schematics because, once again, you're doing installation as a large part of this job. In the battery systems, you have to be familiar with the tests and procedures that are common to all technicians for 12 or 24 volt battery systems. So things like cleaning or charging, load testing, determining state of charge. But what differentiates battery systems on these vehicles from other vehicles are auxiliary batteries and the isolators for those systems. So if you walk into this without knowing much about the auxiliary battery systems, where to locate them, how to power them, how to wire them up, and the isolators for those, you'll be seeing questions that you're unfamiliar with. Under the auxiliary power content area, in this section, you'll see questions about inverters, components that convert DC to AC current, and questions about electric motors or electric hydraulic components, because these are the things that drive an awful lot of these equipment that are being put onto the vehicles. Charging systems, you know, these questions are going to mirror the questions you might see in the truck repair test pretty closely. On lighting systems, you should expect questions on a variety of topics relating to lighting. You should be familiar with the procedures for inspecting, testing, repair, adjustment, or replacement of lighting systems and their components. You need to be able to determine amperage loads on circuits to be sure that they're not overloaded when you're installing additional lighting systems. But you also need to be versed in lighting regulations. These often have regulations governing the chism, the center high mount stoplight, the specific lights. If you've lengthened a trailer by or lengthen a truck by a certain amount, then it runs into other lighting requirements. So being familiar with the DOT lighting requirements on trucks is a must for this. Since replacing lights with LED units is now very common, you'll need to be up on all of the problems that this can bring to the systems. This applies to all lighting systems and wiring systems. In content area F on the E2 test, It's on associated electrical circuits and components. Here's where you'll see questions about electromagnetic clutches, pump clutches, warning devices, interlocks, switches, modules, trailer connections, as well as a variety of other systems and components. Moving on to the E3 test. This test is very unique to ASE. We really don't have hydraulic questions other than if you, of course, you consider the brakes a hydraulic system. But otherwise you don't have, we don't have a test that's specific to hydraulic systems with their pumps, the reservoirs, hoses, control valves, etc. So this is something you're probably going to have to seek out information on if you're looking to pass this test and you've never worked on this equipment for a living. Since this is also an installation test, you're going to see something you've never seen in an ASE test in the hydraulic schematics, and you'll need to be able to interpret those. They have their own set of symbols and language on those hydraulic schematics, and you're expected to be familiar with those. Under hydraulic systems, this includes questions about pumps and filtration, reservoirs, hoses, fittings, connections, control valves, actuators, whole host of unusual control devices. The mechanical systems on the E3 test is pretty much all about PTOs, how they function, where they can be mounted, how to mount them most efficiently. Finally, pneumatic systems. Of course, it's only 2 questions on this test, but it covers air-activated systems, their controls, their protection devices, and regulators for the system. In talking about our ASE study guide, I like to say that ASE really doesn't do training. For us to do training and testing is a conflict of interest. But it's incumbent upon us to tell you what you're going to be tested on. And that's what the ASE study guide is. That document tells you what you're going to be tested on. It tells you what the test specifications are and the task list. I would recommend to anyone before they begin a course of study to go to our website, ase.com, go to the test prep area and dig down to where you can download the study guide for your test series. Do it first before you do anything. And there on the screen you've got a quick link to get you to the study guides where you can download those.
Hey Dave, this is Dave Kappert. I just wanted to quickly mention too to tonight's audience that we have a handout section and there are 2 things in it. One of them, the guide that Dave is talking about right now, you can download that. So you don't even need to go over to our website, and we have a resource page. So back over to you, Dave.
Great, thanks, Dave. When we're talking about, when I say that the study guide gives you information on what you'll be tested upon, this is the first bit of that information. And this is an example for the E1, but it's similar for the E2 and E3. You can see that this lists the general content areas in which you'll be tested. To the right of that, you see the number of questions that you'll see on the test related to that content. And of course, the percentage that represents of the questions on the test. When we're determining how many questions to put on a test, we leave that up to the subject matter experts. And what we ask them is we say, think about each of these different content areas and think about how much time you spend doing each of those particular tasks. And that should really reflect the number of questions also on the test. So if you're spending 25% of your time doing frame preparation, then approximately 25% of the questions on this test should be related to frame preparation. You can see that body and equipment amounts to 53%, 24 of the questions on this. So obviously these upfitters, these bodybuilders spend a large part of their time actually doing the preparation and installation of these systems. In the study guide, you'll know that the first content area was frame preparation. We then take that content area and we break it down into the specific tasks with which you should be familiar when you come to take the test. So you can use, the reason we call this our study guide is you can use this as a guide for your study. Number one, verify wheelbase, cab to axle, cab to trunnion measurements, and tandem axle spread. I know how to do that. Great, let's move on to 2. Verify gross vehicle weight rating and gross axle weight rating. Okay, I know where to find that information. But maybe I don't know how to determine the layout locations. So I need to seek out information on that in training that's available so that when I come to take the test, I'm familiar with that, the knowledge and the skills required to do those tasks. Let's just show a few examples of some of the questions that you'll use and talk about the question style too. The first type of question that we use on ASE tests is what we call a direct question or a completion style. And that is a simple statement, a question that requires you to pick out the right answer and differentiate that from the wrong answer or the wrong answers. Or it requires you to choose one of the answers that completes the statement so that it is a true statement. We'll tell you that we work hard on these questions with subject matter experts. The way it works in question writing sessions is they propose questions to one another and then they hammer on them until they get them into a form in which all 15 or 20 of those subject matter experts agree that that's a good and fair question to ask of someone doing this job. They all have to agree that there's only one right answer, and then they have to develop those three other answers, and we call those distractors. Often we call them plausible distractors because they are plausible enough to draw away the attention of somebody who's not completely knowledgeable on the topic. So in this one, when installing a full channel frame reinforcement on the mild steel chassis frame shown in the illustration, the best technique is to, and the statement that completes that in a correct fashion is, circular fillet weld the web of the reinforcement to the chassis frame, with the incorrect answers being skip weld around the outside of the reinforcement, MIG weld completely around the outside of the reinforcement, weld the reinforcement to the top and bottom chassis frame flanges.
Dave, can I interrupt for just a second?
Certainly.
I had a question. One of the folks asked, who are these subject matter experts? Can you describe those folks to these people? Thank you.
Yeah, these folks are people who we've identified through interaction with the industry as, first of all, working in that discipline every day for a living. Secondly, we try to pick them from geographical locations all over the United States because often the job isn't the same in each part of the country. You'll notice that when you get on the test, there's only maybe a couple or usually one, at the most two questions about plow equipment on a vehicle because The guys in Arizona's, they are not dealing with plows all that much. And if a question is put on there, all of the subject matter experts have to agree that, well, somebody doing this job probably will be able to answer that correctly if they're well versed in the technology. But we identify them, we invite them into the workshop. Typically in a workshop, about half of the participants will have been to a question writing workshop before, and the other half are new to the process. That's because we constantly want to get new blood in there, but also we bring back the other ones because they help us with production in a workshop. But as I said, these are folks who, through our interaction with the industry, we've determined they're pretty much an expert in this field, and they do the job every day for a living in one way or another. And maybe they're the manager of the shop, or maybe they're the technician in the shop, or maybe they're a trainer for a large firm, or they might even be a trainer for a manufacturer of components that we're writing about. So all of them, you can count on the fact that they pretty much know their stuff. Moving on to the second type of question. This is the question that I guess ASE is probably well known for, and a lot of guys just are not real wild about this question. But what this is, the Tech A, Tech B style questions, is really just two true or false questions, statements put together, and in order so that we can make a four-choice answer out of it. What we often tell candidates to do on this is just consider A statement alone. What B is saying really shouldn't have an influence over what A is saying, and vice versa. So you want to look at the question, you want to read A's statement and determine, is that true or is that false? Then read B's without considering what A said and determine, is that statement true or is it false? And then determine your answers. So if you break it down in those terms, and usually when I'm talking to a candidate who's struggling with the ASE exams and maybe they're missing the cut score by just one or two, if I explain to them about the Tech A, Tech B just being two true or false questions or statements, it often makes a difference of 1 or 2 points on their exam. In this case, the question reads, a bed cap or topper being installed on a pickup body does not have a center high-mounted stop lamp. The truck itself is equipped with a center high-mount stop lamp. Technician A says that a chisel is required if the vehicle gross weight rating is 10,000 pounds or less. B says that this is required if the vehicle is over 80 inches wide. Now, you can see I said earlier how you're going to have to memorize some specifications sometimes for this test, and this is one of them also, in which the subject matter expert says this is so common and so critical that they would expect you to know this information. In this case, our correct answer on this is A only is correct. B is making a false statement. This last style question that I'm going to talk about is an accept style. And this is, you won't see as many of these on the test. As a matter of fact, some of our test administrators will go to great lengths to try not to put these on, but they do address information well sometimes. The reason that they're difficult is it requires you to put your brain into reverse. You've been asked through most of the test, okay, what is the correct answer? Now you've got to identify the one that's incorrect among the four. So you've got 3 answers that are correct and one that's incorrect in this style. When you see this on the exam at the test center, there's always a warning that's above this question that say, hey, this is an accept question. It's different from others. Read it carefully before you choose your answer. In this case, a technician is selecting a hydraulic hose to replace a damaged suction hose. All of these should be considered except. Now the correct answer is the pressure relief setting of the hydraulic system. While the correct answers are vacuum rating of the hose, you would want to consider that. The pump flow at the operating RPM, you need to consider that, as well as compatibility to the oil in the system. Okay, just a little information item here, which is how long are these tests? Well, the E1 test is 55 questions long, plus it will have, well, I think that 55 includes pretest questions. So it's normally 45 scored items and 10 pretest items. You've got, when you go to the test center, you get an hour and 15 minutes to complete it. If you're taking the recertification version of it, there are 23 questions and you've got 30 minutes to complete it. And you can see the similar information for E2 and E3. Okay, that said, I think what I'm going to do now is turn it back over to my colleague Dan, who's going to talk about how to get registered and find a seat and the computer-based testing process. Dan?
Thank you, Dave. All of our tests are on computer right now, computer-based testing available through Prometric testing facilities as well as satellite centers across the country. There's nearly 500 test centers available. You can register for your ASE tests at myase.com. You can also manage your credential there. You can see what tests you have that are expiring, what tests require, in that case, would require recertification. You can also purchase tests there. A Find a Seat tool is available along with a seat finding a test center tool at the ASE.com website. Also, there is information about work experience requirements. We had a gentleman ask a question about finding out where they need to fill out work experience forms. We do that online. That's available through ASE.com. You can also schedule an appointment separately, meaning that in this particular case, if you would like to take a test for make an appointment for one test, you can do that, or you can schedule many tests on the same day. There is a testing time limit or appointment window limit. I think it's 6 hours, 6.5 hours, or 6 hours and 45 minutes. More information about that available on the ASE website. You cannot take our ASE tests on your home computer. There is a requirement that they be in a secure testing environment. The Prometric testing centers have a security protocol. It's we all in the automotive industry, in the truck industry, bus, transit bus, school bus, collision series, the service professionals out there that do the service writing, we're all professionals. We want to be treated as such, so we test at professional testing facilities, and they treat us at the security level that is the highest common denominator for those folks testing at that facility. So that's where that is. At this point now, I'd like to open this up for some questions. Dave, one of the questions here that we saw was interested on technical information, and I would like to preface this by saying that most technical information related to the tests are brought in by those technicians, service professionals from industry that come to the ASE test question writing and workshops. So this question may be a little bit a stretch for us as service professionals here as test administrators. Where is the best place to find specs when they're fabricating?
Thanks. Can you hear me again, Dan? I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, sir. We're good.
Okay, great. You know, every manufacturer of trucks out there, if you go online, and Google, say, GM Trucks bodybuilder manual. Everyone produces a bodybuilder manual for their trucks. Whether it be Navistar or Peterbilt or Mack, they all produce a bodybuilder manual. And it gives you an awful lot of the specifications and the criteria under which you have to work when you're upfitting these vehicles. So I would say you need to start with that. And in just a moment, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about many of those. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've uploaded a document with some of those resources too, correct?
Yeah, in the handouts little part of your nav menu there you'll find not only the study guide that we've talked about a lot tonight, but there's a resource guide in there that staff here put a fair amount of time in putting together for your assistance. So make sure you take a look at that and look at some of those websites. Some of those links get a little bit long, but they're pretty specific about where they
There,
go.
I brought them up.
Dan, is it all right if we go ahead and we take maybe a couple live questions from the audience?
Of course. Yes, go right ahead, Dave.
Let's try an audio question once. We've had Daniel M. has had his hand up for a while. So Daniel, let's try unmuting your mic and over to you. Okay, I'm sorry, I lost Daniel. Let's go to, oh, there's Daniel. Let's try one more time. Daniel, you're good to go.
All right. Where would you suggest to get more additional training material on the hydraulics version?
Well, a few different areas. You know, this truck series was sponsored by the National Truck Equipment Association. And so and they have a number of resources that you can draw on. So I always recommend going to their site, which is ntea.com, and looking for their resource section. While a lot of the stuff you might have to pay for, they've also got links to almost all the various manufacturers who make that hydraulic equipment. And if you go to their site, most of their manuals for their equipment and for their systems are free, online, downloadable in a PDF. So if you're using specific hydraulic system, I would go to that manufacturer and look online for their manuals. I think it's going to include the information you want.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Now let's go over next to Richard S. Richard S. is with us by phone tonight. Richard, go ahead, please. Richard, the floor is yours. I know you're with us by phone. Not sure you're hearing my voice or not. Yeah. Go ahead, Richard.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
So if I wanted to take the test for the frame, where can I get information from that? Is that the same thing that I'm looking at as far as like traders and trucks?
Yeah, if you can see on the screen there, if you scroll down there, like if you were working on a Mack truck or you were working on a Navistar truck, you would go to their site and look for their bodybuilder manual. I've got direct links listed there to those bodybuilder manuals for several of these, but you can go to Google and just punch in Navistar bodybuilder manual or Peterbilt bodybuilder manual, and it'll take you to there, and you'll get most of the specifications from the vehicle manufacturer there. Things like your connection points, where you can cut on the frame, where you can't, what their limitations are, where you can drill. But depending upon the equipment that you're adding, you've got to couple that equipment manufacturer's manual, installation manual, with the OE manual for that. in order to do the job properly. You've got two different governing bodies there. You got the OE and what they say can be done with their truck, and you got the equipment manufacturer and what they say can be done with their equipment.
All right, thank you, Dave. All right, let's go next over to JRW. JR, the mic is yours. JR, the mic is muted on your end, so you have to unmute it. I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot, otherwise we're going to move on. All right, for whatever reason, JR is not able to get his mic to work, so go ahead and let's press on. Dan, anything else going on over in the chat window that we need to be aware of?
Give me a second to catch up here. They're scrolling up pretty fast. Dave, would this test series also apply to modified vans, mobility vehicles, or also camping type RV vehicles?
I would say it would if that is a box that's added to a cab and chassis. Yes. I think a lot of the things are the same. Often you have the same inverter systems you have to deal with on the electrical. I know that they talk an awful lot about emergency equipment and ambulances, which are very much the same. So I think they share similar issues, yes. Now usually though, those vehicles come directly from the manufacturer already complete, whereas this test really focuses on installing all the auxiliary equipment to a cab and a frame.
Dave, I'm not sure you can answer this. I have a question from a student, and they're asking about on the DOT specifications that come from DOT. And they're specific to that. They're asking, would a CDL help with understanding the weights and specs of DOT as related to these the particular tasks or job descriptions for the candidates that are seeking the E-Series credentials? Would you be able to answer that? That's kind of out of our realm, correct?
Yeah, it really is. I'm not familiar with the requirements for a commercial driver's license, so now I couldn't answer that.
Okay, I've answered most all of the questions that are specific to things that are outside of the realm of this particular conversation that we're having about the E-Series of exams. I don't see much else popping in here that's it's going to fit. So I think we're pretty good there, Dave.
All right, why don't we go ahead and just wrap this up then, and as a final reminder, fall test registration started September 1 going on through November 22nd. So we're kind of about in the middle of that window. And ASE testing is now available. It's continuous through the year. And remember, the registration and appointment are two separate steps. You always have 90 days from the time that you register to schedule your appointment after registration. On behalf of Dave Milne and Dan Baumhart, I'm Dave Kappert, and thanks for joining us tonight. And we hope to see you at an ASE webinar soon. Thanks. Take care.